Which is better, capitalism or socialism? That's a question that we are going to try and answer here. By the way, Margaret Thatcher said that socialism works until you run out of other people's money. How true, how true, how true. For socialism to work, you have to have a funnel of money or a big amount of money, which can only be possible if you were a capitalistic society. So what has been afflicting countries such as United Kingdom, France, Germany, many Western European countries, and now increasingly in the United States and Canada is this tilt towards socialism, somehow trying to create a narrative whereby people say that those who are rich got it by plundering the poor and so on and so forth. So here is a very objective study and comparison of capitalism versus socialism, how both think that they can raise the standards of people and how they get there, and that's what we are going to do here. We are taking data from an essay. I'm going to give you all the details in just a short while, a small infographic to explain all the concepts and graphs by way of graphs, and also a request to all of you to please like this video, and if you have not already subscribed to our channel, do subscribe to our channel. So the enduring economic debate, which is better, socialism or capitalism? So here we present you both the philosophies. First philosophy is fiscal critique. This philosophy, that is socialism, is often critiqued as something where it requires money to start with, and then you start redistributing it among the lower strata of the society, and you think that they will raise themselves up. This works unless there is some external factors that you throw in. For example, unbridled illegal immigration. That throws a huge spanner into the works in this whole concept. So I still don't know how the Labour Party politicians or all these socialist politicians in Western Europe sleep at night, because they have really ruined this whole concept. If there was no illegal immigration, socialism had a hope of success, but with illegal immigration, the stress never ceases, and you are forced to increase taxes more and more and more and more until you see people with high net worth, people who can generate jobs, completely abandon the country and go for greener pastures. But be that as it may, let's take a look at how socialism as a concept works. First thing they do is high taxation and redistribution. That is, government funds social programs by taxing high earners and businesses. What's the problem with that? Well, what happens is those who are making a lot of money feel disincentivized. They say, why should we work so hard to create jobs when whatever we earn is all being taken away by high taxes? So what happens? They try to find out a way to not pay high taxes. For example, you take UK and the adjacent country Ireland. Ireland has a corporate tax of 12%, and UK is much more than that. In fact, UK is going into the clouds as far as taxation is concerned. So let me ask you this question. Any company that is doing well in UK today, if it can move its headquarters to Ireland and start paying lesser corporate tax, why would it not do so? Right? That's exactly what is happening. This is called as tax inversion in the United States. Many US companies, especially the Fortune 500 companies, pay very little tax in the United States, and they have incorporated themselves in lesser taxed havens such as Ireland, Singapore, what have you, some even in Dubai. So these are all problems that is ongoing. US at least realized this fairly early on. In the first term of Trump, they reduced the corporate tax to 22% from 35%, and that 22, by the time you actually account for all the deductions, it comes down to 15 to 18%, which is manageable. This is corporate tax. And same way, Trump reduced the personal income tax also. So US, for at least during the Trump era, they realized the folly of this. And in fact, one good thing that the Democrats did was they did not touch the taxation. They did not raise taxes for anyone, even though they have this frothing at the mouth politicians who don't know shit talking about taxing the rich. I mean, that's how much disdain I have for some who are having hopes of becoming president someday. So when you have reduced economic incentive, we told you that high earners don't feel like working hard anymore. then what happens? They move their businesses, they stop working, and that leads to a shrinking tax base. Remember, I told you that funnel that is supposed to be funding all the social programs starts shrinking, and it starts shrinking very, very fast. Then what happens? The government can no longer fund its promises, leading to instability. I'll give you an example. It's very hard to believe, but that's exactly what is happening in United Kingdom. Whether you are illegal or not, once you reach the shores of UK, you are entitled to some benefits that can never be taken away. You are guaranteed a roof over your head, you are given free health benefits, you are given a dole, and the more children you have, the more money you get, and you don't have to work for any of this. Whereas your neighbor, a citizen of United Kingdom, has to work 24 hours a day to put food on the table, and they don't enjoy any of these benefits. Why haven't the people asked these questions? UK, people of Western Europe, why are you not asking these questions? Doesn't it seem unfair? Anyway, you might start thinking here is another dyed-in-the-wool capitalist talking, but I'm just asking you basic questions, right? How is it fair that somebody who works hard day and night doesn't get to enjoy the benefits of someone who has come in illegally and then starts frothing at the mouth and start demanding more and more and more and more, while you are working more and more and more and more and getting less and less and less and less? Just answer this question. Forget about capitalism or socialism. Now, let's take a look at this incentive versus tax rate. How far can you push the taxation? Here is a conceptual economic output, and if you assume that 100 is the maximum output you can get, and you achieve that by taxing someone at 60%. Now you can say, wait a minute, I don't think UK is charging anyone 60% corporate tax rate. How are you saying that 60% is where you get the maximum output? Well, you can push the system to some extent and the system will accept it. But take a look at how many taxes companies have to pay. You have to pay the federal tax, you have to pay the state tax, sometimes you have to pay county tax, sometimes you have to even give the city tax, plus some cess on top of that. By the time you see all these things, numbers start adding up. So once this net tax starts increasing beyond 50%, at some point the output starts falling off the cliff. And there is no more money going around to do all the social programs. But guess what? You have got people completely habituated to getting freebies. How will you wean them away? They won't. They won't work. They expect their money. And if you try to push them to work, they'll get to the streets, and there is street power. That's exactly what is happening in United Kingdom today. And I'm sure this is happening in France and Germany and many other countries also. So this is the argument that capitalists give, that socialism is no good. Now let's take a look at the second philosophy, which is the counter argument that socialists give as to why socialism works. According to them, the first thing it does is, first pillar, they have three pillars. The first pillar is it's addressing market failures. This argument states that unchecked capitalism creates destructive inequality, and that social programs like healthcare and education are public investments that improve human capital, increase social mobility, and stabilize economic demand. Now, there is some truth in what they are saying. You should not have cutthroat capitalism, and I am also against cutthroat capitalism, which is what happens when you have quarter-to-quarter reporting where company performance is ahead of everything else. So the C-suite, the corporate suite, is completely focused only on improving the bottom line and showing good numbers and cutting way back beyond the bone, and the company finally gets gutted. By the time the private equity guys come in, that's what is happening in the United States. So on the one side, Trump wants to create new jobs. On the other side, he's seeing many of these working companies being completely culled out. It's called as strip mining. I've done a couple of episodes on this. Do go back and look at strip mining to understand how private equity is becoming a destructive influence on corporate America. Anyway, so if you look at the social spending, the chart shows that conceptually 75% has to go into public investment and 25% has to go in the form of handout. Public investment is like free healthcare and so on, and handout is essentially dole. And they say that if you do this method, then by giving low investment, you can raise 20% of the population to a point where the social mobility becomes usable. But if you start using medium investment, 1 in 2 people can be raised out of poverty. And if you put very high investment, close to 70% of the lower strata will actually start climbing. These are theoretical numbers. It has not been proven. Now, the second pillar, they say this is the first pillar. The second pillar is the multiplier effect. They say if you put 100 pounds in the hand of a rich man, then that rich person will probably go and deposit it in his or her bank and won't spend it. Whereas if you put the same 100 pounds in a low income family, they'll immediately spend it. Then what happens is the multiplier effect kicks in. That money goes into the economy. Somebody else makes some money. There's a O. Henry story about this. Do read that one, about how one small event will start kindling the entire local economy. This is the theory that they put. So what happens is they say that if you give money to lower income groups, the funds are distributed and used up almost immediately, and that goes into the system. That increased immediate spending boosts local services and local businesses, and that will itself start creating robust activity. Now, once this cycle starts, it starts feeding upon itself, and it becomes a faster multiplier than money saved by the high earners. So this is the argument that is put. To some extent, this does work, I must say. But the interesting data here is, what is the propensity to spend? In other words, how much money out of this 100 pounds that I told you about, theoretical 100 pounds, how much of that does a lower income group family spend? And it comes out to 95 pounds. They only save 5 pounds. Whereas the higher income group spends only 40 pounds and they keep 60 pounds as savings. So this is the one thing. But there is an underlying truth that all the socialist parties realize, and that is that it helps them preserve their vote bank. Just keep on giving freebies and they will keep voting for you. You can indulge in whatever you want because you know that come election time, you know what needs to be done to keep getting the votes. And this will work until other people's money runs out. That is the big problem. Now, take a look at what is happening in United Kingdom. I'm just taking one country, anti-Semitism. Now, why are the Britons allowing their Jewish population, very small minority, which is actually, I think, less than 1%, if I remember correctly, and they pay 12% of the total taxes collected by Great Britain, punching way above their weight. And why are they being singled out? Anyway, these are questions I'm asking. Those of you who are economists or even hobbyists can answer what is really going on and how, in the eyes of Western European nations, socialism actually is the best thing that happened since apple pie. So if you take a look at voter priorities, voters supporting this view are seen as prioritizing immediate tangible needs over abstract long-term fiscal concerns. So what they are trying to do is they would like to take the money and spend it immediately on things like healthcare and housing and so on and so forth, and that works out to close to 80%, and they only think about long-term fiscal stability such as owning a home, only 20%. So what happens? Everybody becomes a renter. Why? Because the money for the rent is being paid by the state. Everybody starts depending on dole. You don't have to work. See, this is what is really hurting the societies in the Western Europe, and it is now beginning to plague United States and Canada too. And I don't know when the dam is going to burst, but it's not very far away. So the perceived systemic failures are justified, saying that this kind of stuff takes care of corporate welfare and subsidies, regulatory capture by special interests, persistent wage stagnation, and tax loopholes for the wealthy. The point they are trying to make is that the wealthy are the ones who are writing the laws, and they write the laws to suit them rather than the wider strata of the society, which is poorer. And the corporate also get welfares and subsidies that the lower strata doesn't get, and therefore socialism is the answer to all the problems. Now, let's take a look at the side by side. What really happens? This is a perpetual tension. In any democracy, you'll see one party leaning to the right or away from the left. The left is the Socialist Party, the right, or this is what the left says. I would say the non-left is usually the Republican or the Bharatiya Janata Party or AFD in Germany or Marie Le Pen's party and so on and so forth. So what happens is when they look at the economy, they have very clear objectives. They prioritize fiscal discipline. That means don't spend unnecessarily. They also emphasize on tax incentives for growth, which is to cut taxes, and they also focus on capital creation. Capital creation is something that has this magical effect of creating a lot of jobs. Yeah, now you are saying, okay, here he goes, he's talking being as a capitalist. I'll come to that in just a minute, what my individual preferences are. You can agree with me or disagree with me, but this is what capitalism is all about. Now, if you take a look at socialism, which is a demand side focus, they prioritize on social equity, emphasize public investment in people, and focuses on aggregate demand. Now, which one wins out at the end, we have to see, but I can certainly tell you, look at the United States and look at the Western countries, Western European countries. Why is it that United States has such a high standard of living, such high growth, whereas almost all the economies, especially post-COVID, they are barely scraping by? This is the essay that is the basis for this infographic, is analysis of socialist fiscal philosophy. And to me, there is no alternative other than capitalism. It is flawed, no doubt. There are flavors of capitalism, cutthroat capitalism, which Trump is trying to dissuade. Cutthroat capitalism is like quarter by quarter reporting of results, where you have to keep on showing bigger, better numbers, and that becomes a problem after some time, and you start cutting back. You cut back on your engineering, you cut back on your productive assets, and if you throw in private equity, the whole thing goes for a toss, and the entire company very soon gets culled out completely, and the PE group takes out huge dividends out of it. They go and raid the next company in the next street. This is the problem that is there because of cutthroat capitalism. Hopefully, if the quarterly reporting is changed, maybe things will improve a little bit. I'm hoping it will too. The other thing is you have something called as compassionate capitalism that was defined by George Bush Jr., but I didn't really understand what it was. I don't think it has really taken root in the markets. But what I would vouch for is something called as fair capitalism, where everybody has an equal chance for success as long as they put in the hard yards and they work smart. This is the kind of environment that thrives. And I think America had that fair capitalism for a long time. And then, of course, things started accelerating and it went into this cutthroat capitalism mode. Hopefully, they'll get back to that fair capitalism mode, and that will perhaps a slower growth, but a kinder, gentler nation where we learn to love each other and not hate each other. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.